ونشأة الشباب في تأثم وطاعة ونفقة and then he says fasting for the sharh. If you're a glutton, fasting is really good for you. If you're somebody actually who has good control over his food nafs, right, then fasting is a good thing, but it's not going to be the same for the one who really needs to control his nafs and discipline that aspect of himself. All right? So that it's a good thing for somebody who, or a miser, sadaqah. If you're somebody who's generous, you're helping people, for a miser to give out is better for the heart and there's more reward in it. They asked him, Ya Rasulullah, what's the afdalu sadaqah? قال أفضل صدقة حينما أنت صحيح شحيح تخشى الفقر. The best sadaqah is when you're sound, you're in good health, and you're shahih, you don't want to give it out, and you have fear of poverty. That's the best one. Because turghim anf shaitan, it's like really rubbing shaitan's nose in, yeah, in it. Thanks. I didn't want to say that. And then he says, or the young, or a youth spent in avoiding wrongs. So obviously there's people in the ummah who they spent their whole life being horrible people, and then they get old and they make tawbah, and then they start wagging fingers at all the young people. Right? I mean, obviously that person does not have the same maqam as a young person who spent their youth when they had all that energy to be disobedient. Like the old guy, he doesn't have the energy to do wrong things anymore. Right? So tawbah is a lot easier on an older person, except for the fact that if you disobey Allah throughout your youth, oftentimes the heart's so encrusted that you have a bad seal. But, for alhamdulillah, a lot of Muslims do make tawbah as they get older. They hit 40, 45, and they start getting, that's, like in Tunisia, Qais isn't here, but in Tunisia they say, Sin al-Taklif arba'un, the year of responsibility is 40, because that's when the wahi came down. In other words, like, do whatever you want before 40, and then, it's just ignorance. But the point is, there are a lot of Muslims that kind of have that attitude. When I go to Hajj, then I'm going to grow my beard and I'll be a good Muslim. There's Muslims who say that. And they go to Hajj, and some do. They get better, They come back and they're better. And these are kind of attitudes that have accrued in the Muslim world that unfortunately they're ignorant, But they really are. They've become like almost cultural artifacts that indicate how far we've come from our tradition. But anyway. So a youth that raised up in, Allah loves the youth. نَشَأَ فِي طَاعَةِ اللَّهِ. Allah loves that man. Shabab is from, generally from like, the Arabs would generally say it's from 15 to 35. That's Shabab. 15 to 35. Some say 15 to 40. So, but that's it. After 40, you're no longer a shab. You're rajul. A man, you're man, rajul. And then he says, وَنَفَقَةَ الْمُلَمِ خِيَارَهُ وَهُوَ صَحِيحٌ قَانِصًا بِهَا رِضَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى مُخْلِصًا. And also, the contributions of a miser for the best of his wealth when he is in a sound state, seeking it by the pleasure of Allah without sincerity. All of these things purify the heart. مِمَّا يُصَفِّيهِ وَمَا أَخْفَاهُ كَذَا وَخَيْرُ السَّعِي مَا صَفَّاهُ. All of these things purify the heart. Moreover, anything done with discretion and concealment is also purifying, and the best of it endeavors is the one that purifies the heart. So the best thing that you can do in your life are things that are good for the heart. Purify the heart. And that's why we're doing this class, and that's why he's telling us all these things. Likewise, كما أضر الذنب ما أقساه بأن أدمته أو استحلاه. And also, the worst things are those things that harden the heart, and you were constant in or enjoyed doing it. The nafs liked it, right? So those things are the worst things for the heart, things that harden the heart. One of the things that hardens the heart is speaking a lot without mentioning Allah. And that's in the Muwatta of Imam Malik. Sayyidina Isa is reported to have said, don't sit in majlis without mentioning Allah, because a majlis in which Allah is not mentioned will harden your heart and you're not even aware of it. So the hardening of the heart occurs without being aware of it, physically and spiritually. And the more the tongue is occupied in remembering Allah, the softer the heart gets, right? Really, the more dhikr somebody does, the softer the heart gets, and the more compassion and the more benefit they get from it. So that's, and then وَفَضَّلُوا ذَنْبًا لِذُلْمٍ جَرَّ عَلَى عِبَادَةٍ كَسَدْكَ كِبْرًا. Now this is a really important point. Sidi ibn Atayla radiallahu anhu said, مَعْصِيَةً أَوْرَثَتْ ذُلًّا وَافْتِقَارًا خَيْرٌ مِنْ طَاعَةٍ أَوْرَثَتْ عِزًّا وَاسْتِكْبَارًا. That a wrong action that leads to a feeling of shame and bereft, impoverishment before Allah is better than obedience that leads to feeling proud and arrogant. Now, and this is the secret of wrong actions. In other words, the wisdom of wrong actions is that Allah wanted us to do wrong to bring about this state. See, this is the secret of wrong actions, right there. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا لَمْ تُذْنِبُوا لَخَشَيْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ مَا هُوَ أَشَّدْ مِنْهُ الْعُجْبِ. If you didn't do wrong actions, if you didn't do wrong actions, I would have feared for you what's worse than wrong actions. Ujub. Being pleased with yourself, being impressed with yourself, vanity, thinking how wonderful you are. That's worse. And then Hanbara, when he came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Nafaqa Hanbara. I went through that. The point is that when he said to him, لَوْ لَمْ تُخْطِئُوا لَصَافَحَتْكُمْ الْمَلَائِكَةُ فِي الشَّوَارِعِ. If you didn't do wrong actions, you'd be shaking hands with the angels on the streets. Right? That's why little babies, you watch the little babies. I mean, some people say they know Siryaniyat. Abdul Aziz Ibris said, Sidi Abdul Aziz Dabbagh, rahimahullah, that's one of the things he said, but if you look at babies, you can see newborns, like they don't look at your face. They're looking around you. You know, it's amazing. You watch them, they look on both sides of your shoulder. They'll be looking like this. And they have this amazing look of just like... And then the other thing that they look at is light. And they get these awe. It's like they look at light like reminding them of from where they came from. Because they come out of that presence. You know, their arwah. We're in that present. And these are all reminders. Right? It's an amazing thing. So the angel, if you don't have wrong actions, the Prophet said you'd be seeing angels. Now Sidi Ahmed Zarruq says about that the good of ta'ah is in the essence of ta'ah, and the evil of ta'ah that he's talking about is what it results in. So when he says that, don't think that he's in any way saying that obedience there's bad obedience and there's good ma'asiyah. That's not what he's saying, so don't confuse that. What it means is that ta'ah is good, ma'asiyah is bad. But if the secondary result of it was pride, when you did a good thing, but the result of disobedience was tawbah, then in reality, exactly. You see what I mean? So he's not saying that ma'asiyah is better than ta'a'udhu billah. What he's saying is that the results of the actions, you might think it's good, and it turns out, and that's why asan takrahu shay'an wa khairun lakum. Maybe you hate this ma'asiyah that you did, but in fact it was a good thing for you because it brought you to Allah. Right? It brought you to Allah. Just like those people here in America, they killed somebody or they robbed a store and they go to prison and they got guidance in the prison. That happened to a lot of people. So that disobedience that they did actually ended up being part of the causative process of the means by which they were given guidance. And so even though it was a disobedience, it was actually, it led them to guidance. So it wasn't a good thing, but it resulted in a good thing. And that's what he's saying. That a good action that results in a arrogance is worse. In other words, what it results in is worse than a wrong action that results in humility. And then he says, وذرة من عمل القلب العلي مثل الرضا والزهد والتوكل أفضل عند الله من جبال شمخن من ظواهر الأعمال. This is really important. An atom's weight of high praiseworthy action from the heart is better than high mountains of external actions with no heart. And that's that idea of فإن ركعتين من محب خير من ألف من غير حب. That to do 2 rakats with love is better than 1,000 without. Much better. And then he mentions something that Imam Sahnun radiyallahu anhu said, which is وَتَرْكُ دِرْهَمٍ لِكَوْنِهِ حَضَرٍ أَفْضَلُ مِنْ تَصَدُّقَاتٍ وَعُمَرٍ. Imam Sahnun said, leaving 1 daniq from what Allah made haram is better than doing 70,000 hajj and umrah. Daniq is like a penny, farthing. It's like a really least amount of money in Arabic tradition. They say, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq said, أَرْبَعَةٌ عِزُّهَا ظُلْمٌ. There's 4 things that even the best of it, there's a basement in it. He said, a dain walaw daniq, a debt even if it's a daniq, like a least amount. A bint walaw Maryam, a daughter even if it's Maryam, right? Because they don't have the protection that a son has. If a man has a son, he's strong and in the society, and whereas a daughter, she's going to be in a situation where it would be more difficult to protect herself and things like that. It's not saying that son's better than a daughter. It's just saying that in those situations that her is still, she doesn't have the izz that a man has by merely being a man, just out of strength, physical strength and things like that. And then, because aziz, don't forget, in Arabic also means qawi, physically strong, or politically strong, like Azizul Masr. And then he says, وَالسُّؤَالُ وَلَوْ كَيْفَ الطَّرِيقِ وَالْوَحْشَ وَلَوْ لَيْلَةِ. Asking a question even if it's how do I go on this road. There's a type of, even though there's nothing wrong with it, there's a humility that comes with it. And then, وَحْشَ وَلَوْ لَيْلَةِ, like being alone even for a night. So anyway, now we go to the root causes of the disease. Let's see. Let me get through these, and then what I'll do, next week I'm going to do treatment of the diseases of with remembrance of Allah. And inshallah Sheikh Khatri will be here, so I'm going to ask him if he'll come and do this class next week. Inshallah, so if you're going to have questions and things like that. And he loves this book, and he knows it. He knows this book really well. He spent a lot of time with this book, and I read sections of it with him. I read the Sharh al-Khudaym with a lot of it with Sheikh Khatri, but I read it with Sheikh Abdullah, and I read the other Sharh, and we did khatam of it on the Hajj. We did on Arafat. We made khatam of the book, and then we made a dua of all the diseases. Name them all, that Allah inshallah would purify us of them. Inshallah, yataqabbal minna. Inshallah, and all of us. So he says, وَأَصْرَهَا الْجَامِعُ حُبَّ الْحَاضِرِ فِيمَا حَكَى الْهِلَالِ وَابْنُ عَاشِرِ. He says the comprehensive etiology of all of these diseases is love of the temporal world. This is the opinion of both Imam al-Hilali and Imam Ibn Ashar. So their opinion was that حُبَّ الْحَاضِرِ, love of this world, is the root disease. And there's difference of opinion. Like we saw, Ibn Abbad said the root is tama', is desire. But again, you could see how it's hub, and so you get in, these are really semantic differences. They're all pretty much agreeing. Even Ibn Ashar radiallahu anhu, when he says it's hub al-riyasa, it's still hub al-dunya, because why do you want riyasa? You want power, you want dunya, you want all these things. So in the end, really, it's hub al-dunya. And there's a hadith, even though it's weak, رَأْسُ كُلِّ خَطِيَةٍ حُبْ الْعَاجِلَةِ. Love of this world is the reason for every wrong action. Ibn Ata'illah, on the other hand, considered it to be a man's self-satisfaction. And that's really interesting. So Ibn Atayla actually had a different take on it. It's still similar, but it's a different take. And he, radiallahu anhu, was a scholar. He died in 709, which is 1309, the Christian era. And he's actually considered one of the greatest masters of this science. He wrote the Hikam, and he was a Maliki jurist, and he was, Imam al-Bannani said, had it been permissible to recite other than the Quran in prayer, it would have been permissible with the Hikam, which is a hyperbole, it's an exaggeration. He's just saying how great the Hikam was. And Ibn Atayla says in the 35th Hikmah, he says that the source, وَعَلَمْ بِأَنَّ أَصْرَ, he says the source, أَصْرُ كُلِّ مَعْصِيَةٍ وَشَهْوَةٍ وَغَفْلَةٍ الرِّضَاء عَنِ النَّفْسِ وَأَصْلُ كُلِّ طَاعَةٍ وَعِفَّةٍ وَيَقَظَةٍ عَدَمُ الرِّضَاء مِنْكَ عَنْهَا. He says that the source of every disobedience, indifference, and passion is self-satisfaction, whereas the source of every obedience, vigilance, and virtue is dissatisfaction with oneself. And then he says, it is better for you to keep company with an ignorant man, dissatisfied with himself, than to keep company with a learned man satisfied with himself. And then he says, for what knowledge is there in a self-satisfied scholar, and what ignorance is there in an unlearned man dissatisfied with himself? And then he says here, وَأَصْرُ كُلِّ خَصَرَةٍ وَقَالَ إِنَّ أَصْرَ كُلِّ دَاءِ رِضَى الْفَتَى عَنْ نَفْسِهِ الْعَطَاءِ. Ibn Atayla said that. وَأَصْرُ كُلِّ خَصَرَةٍ تُسْتَحْسَنُ عَدَمُهُ وَالْوَجْهُ فِيهِ بَيِّنُ. So he's saying, and the reason for every good character or quality is lack of self-satisfaction. In other words, even if this culture, if you look at it, their whole idea of getting rid of shame and they have all these things, right? But look at the fact that the reason the guy's in the self-help section buying the book of how to get rid of shame, why is he there? He's dissatisfied with himself. In other words, if he was happy if he didn't have any shame, if he felt great. So the guy that wrote the book doesn't want you to be self-satisfied. He wants to sell you the book. So he's glad that you're not there, you know. Right? They're all just liars and hoaxers, most of them. So the point is that dissatisfaction with the self is what causes you to want to change. If you're satisfied with yourself, if anybody here was satisfied with himself, they wouldn't be here. Right? Inshallah. Nobody would be here. Why would you be here studying the disease of the heart if you thought that you were free of them? But the fact that people have these troubles is what actually makes them want to go out and get better. And that's how you go out and seek help. If you feel that you don't have guidance, you seek guidance. وَمَنْ أَسْلَمَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ تَحَرَّوْا رَشَدًا. The one who submits to Allah, he starts seeking guidance. Why? Because now he knows that he needs Allah's guidance. But if you're out there walking around feeling perfectly content, I don't need guidance, I'm guided, then you're not going to seek that guidance. And that's what he's saying there. So he's saying it's clear. How this was arrived at is obvious, right? Now, Sidi Ahmed Zarruq says, and this is important, عَلَامَةُ الرِّضَاءِ عَنِ النَّفْسِ ثَلَاث. There's 3 signs to being content with the soul. رُؤْيَةُ الْحَقِّ لِنَفْسِهِ. It's seeing that the haqq has a right. Now, it's interesting, in this culture, we have a bill of rights, right? But there's no bill of responsibilities. Right? I mean, it's a really interesting phenomenon. Because there's much more focus in Islam on your responsibilities than on your rights. In fact, the Quran is really a bill of Allah's rights. It's the haqq of Allah on us. And that's why huquq al-insan is an alien idea to the Islamic ethos. I mean, human beings do have God-given rights, but they're not human rights. Right? They're huquq Allah fil ibad. They're Allah's rights in His servants. So Allah has a haqq that you don't oppress, His creation. That's a haqq of Allah. So if you kill somebody, you kill them بِغَيْرِ حَقِّهِ. And if you killed him because he warranted it by Sharia, then it's a haqq of Allah that you took his life. Because Allah demands his haqq to be fulfilled. Now Allah gives a human being a haqq, majazan. In other words, if you're wulat ad-dam, you have a haqq. But that haqq was given to you by who? By Allah. Right? So it's a haqq of Allah. And the reason the other person's fulfilling it is because he fears Allah. And this is why fear of Allah is the foundation of a Muslim society. That's the foundation of it. You have to have fear of Allah, taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first one is seeing a haqq for the self. If you see all the time, they're wrong, I'm right. It's a very common psychological disease. You think they did it to me. It's all their fault. The mu'min always think, and there's a story I might have told you this before, but it's important. It's a Moroccan story about a sheikh who there was a self-satisfied alim who didn't like this sheikh. And he was visiting once and he said, you know, the least of my students is better than you. And the sheikh said, how is that possible? And he said, I'll show you. Come to my madrasa tomorrow and I'll show you. So the sheikh comes back the next day. And he tells all of his students, when the sheikh comes in, don't say to him, wa alaikum salam, when he says, salam alaikum. So the sheikh comes in. And he also told him, and when so-and-so comes in, who was a student of his, don't say salam alaikum to him when he comes. So the sheikh comes in, salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. A'udhu billah. These are your students? Hum juhal. ألم يسمعوا بقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أو قول الله تعالى right إذا حييتم فحيوا بتحية بمثلها وأحسن منه. Haven't you heard Allah say, if you're given a greeting, greet or better than that? هؤلاء جهال. So that's what he did. And then he told him Ijlis. And then his student came in and he said, Salam alaikum. Nobody said. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. والله يا إخوان سامحوني يعني أخطأت في حقوقكم فعلت شيء والله سامحوني يعني why aren't you agreeing? Did I do something wrong? Excuse me, whatever I did. And that's a completely, those are the two. One self-satisfied, and the other he's looking, what did I do wrong? And that's see, it's a haqq for the self. The man who came in, he saw, I have a haqq, and my haqq is you return my salam. The other one was saying, what haqq didn't I fulfill that these people aren't saying salam to me? You see, so he's looking from the opposite. And one self-satisfied, and that's why even though he was the least of his students, he's the jahil. That's why Ibn Ata'illah is saying, what knowledge does a man who's self-satisfied have, even if he's an alim? And what ignorance does an ignorant man have if he's not because he's going to ask and want to learn and be taught, right? So it's a hikmah. I don't know if it ever happened. Inshallah it did, but you know, there's meaning in it. So that's the first one. The second one is الإغضاء عن عيوبها بتزكيتها من حيث يرى قبيحها حسنا بالتأويل لأنه يعلم العيب ثم يغضي عنه وإن كان نوعا منه وأنشد في هذا المعنى وعين الرضا عن كل عيب كبيرة لكن عين السخط تبدي المساوية. He says the second one is ignoring the faults of the self by deeming the self to be already in a state of purity, even if it's by interpretation. So for instance, somebody gets angry or somebody's mutakabbir and he says, well, the hadith says be mutakabbir in front of a mutakabbir. And that's just his nature, but he's using, pretending something or like that, So, or he gets angry all the time, he says, al-hiddatu ta'tari khiyara ummati. Anger even gets the worst of my ummah. In other words, I mean the best of my ummah. So I'm from the best of the ummah, and I still get angry. So it's that idea of seeing the faults, but interpreting them in ways that you don't deem them as faults. And this is what he said the poet meant when he said, the eye of contentment an kulli aibin kariratun. An eye that's content doesn't see the fault. Right? Like the one who's in love, they can't see the fault. One of the signs they say of falling out of love, they start noticing all the faults of the person. I never noticed one ear is bigger than the other. I know. Right? So, وَلَكِنْ عَيْنُ سُخْطِ تُبْدِي الْمَسَاوِئ, the eye that's angry begins to show the wrong actions of that person. And then, so those are, and then الشَّفَقَةُ عَلَيْهَا, having compassion for the self. Poor me, I'm really having a hard time, and complaining and that type thing. So those are the three signs that somebody's content with themselves. The three signs that somebody's not content with themselves, according to Sheikh Hamza, is the first one is اتهامها, يتهمها. He's always checking the self, accusing, being suspicious about the self's intentions. And this is Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, who's a prophet, ma'asum. There's a khilaf about the statement, but Sayyid Ahmed Zarruq and others said Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam said, لا أبرئ نفسي, I will never declare myself innocent. إن النفس لأمارة بالسوء. The nafs by its nature commands to evil. So always being suspicious of the self. What were my intentions there? Wondering what it is. Not, am I doing this for riya? من لم يخاف النفاق فهو منافق. Hasan al-Basri said, لا يأمن النفاق إلا المنافق. The only one who feels safe from nifaq is the hypocrite. So the mu'min is always checking the self. الحذر من آفاتها, being careful of the blemishes of the soul. And this is the, in the dua the Prophet said, اللهم لا تكلني إلى نفسي طرفة عين ولا أقل من ذلك. Don't leave me to my soul even for the blink of an eye or less than that. Don't leave me to the soul. And then the final one is حملها على المكاره, forcing the self to do difficult things. Makarih are things it doesn't like. And he mentioned them. Saghab, eating less. Sahar al-layali, spending some time. It's a makraha. It's difficult to do those things. Jihad. Jihad is a makraha. Jihad is a hard thing to do. All these type things, forcing the self to do them for the sake of giving out money. It's a makraha. Self doesn't like it. You want to save your money, right? We want to save our money and get whatever we need or put it away, right? Qirshun abyad liyawmin aswad, whatever. Now, Abu Uthman radiyallahu anhu said, لا يرى عيب نفسه وهو مستحسن شيئا منها. Whoever sees anything good about himself has not seen the faults of his soul. In other words, if you think there's anything good about you, now obviously the question is going to arise here, I think. See, part of the whole Western discourse is this idea, isn't this all self-loathing and low self-esteem and all these, right? This is very antithetical to the modern thing of feeling good about the self, of feeling, right? It is. Now, a couple of things. This is not going to make people these, if you've been around the real shuyukh, they're not these people that are but they really do, they have that humility, they have all these qualities because, like Aisha, we read this morning for the people in this class, Aisha, she is the wife of the best of creation. She was a beautiful woman, physically. She was an intelligent woman, one of the most brilliant women, certainly in Islamic history and in human history. She was from an excellent family, aristocrat from the tiny clan of Quraysh. All these things, and yet, when she's desiring Allah to absolve her to actually declare her innocence, she said, وَكُنْتُ أَرَى نَفْسِي حَقِيرًا. I deem myself as so insignificant. that I would never think Quran would be revealed about me. So this, despite all of those things, she was not a woman with low self-esteem. She was a woman, she was a very excellent woman with self-confidence. She's one of the few people, she asked the Prophet when he said, يدخل الجنة بلا حساب. أولم يقل الله فسوف يحاسب حسابا يسيرا, but they'll get an easy hisab. How is it now you're saying? So she's actually questioning the Prophet with her knowledge on Quran. Nobody else would do that. Only a woman with great self-confidence, or a man, would even think of doing it. A Sahaba wouldn't do things like that. So Aisha had she took an army out. She regretted it, but she took an army out. She حرضتهم. She said, let's go. He's wrong, we're right. Let's go and solve this situation. She went out in her hodaj and went out to the battle of the Jamal. And when one of Sayyidina Ali's men came, he said, Ya Umm al-Mu'mineen. She said, La Umm lak. That's the Arabs say that to really it's kind of an insult. La Umm lak. You don't have a mother. Don't call me your mother. You don't have a mother. Right? So she was a strong lady, radiyallahu anha. But still, her understanding of herself was that she was insignificant. And that is what this is talking about. It's not talking about being in this state of self-loathing and being, without any confidence or things like that. You should be confident. You should have all those things. But you should not be content with yourself. That's all they're saying. Don't be content with yourself. Don't see, always want to change. There's always room for improvement. And that's the point. No matter if you're a master calligrapher, there's always somebody better than you. There's always somebody to be, the perfect tajweed, there's always more mastery of the Quran to be done. So you always deem, I haven't done enough. That's all. And that is because we're human beings, and لم أرى عيب من عيوب النفس كنقص القادرين على التمام. I never saw a fault from amongst the faults of people like the inability for people capable of achieving human perfection, why they don't do it. And the reason they don't do it is because they're satisfied. You get to a level of, alhamdulillah, I recite the Quran reasonably well. I don't really feel a need to go and sit with a tajweed teacher anymore. Khalas, you're self-satisfied. And that's the level you'll get to. Because now you're pleased. But if you say no, right? Khalas. You want to go and increase it more. Lugha al-Arabiya, alhamdulillah, I studied enough. I know qawaid. I'm not going to make any mistakes. Khalas, you're not going to learn anymore. And the thing is, all of these things, they're endless. All these sciences are endless. All of these knowledges are endless. All of these abilities are endless. And the master is not the one who actually achieves the mastery. It's the one who's committed to constant improvement. Right? That's the person who has mastery, because they're always improving. They're always improving their technique. They're always seeing, there's always room, I can do better. But if he feels content, I'm self-satisfied, khalas, there's no more improvement, and then you're dead. So that's what he means, all right? And then he says, لِأَنَّهُ دَاعٍ إِلَى بَحْثِكَ عَنْ أَخْلَاقِهَا فَتَتَّقِي غَيْرَ الْحَسَنِ. Because when a man is dissatisfied with himself, this acts as an impetus to seek virtuous character and to vigilantly avoid what is unbecoming of him. So you're always vigilant about it? Alhamdulillah. So we'll stop there, inshallah, and then next week we'll finish this section. And then what I'm going to do, inshallah, we have how many more classes? 3? Or 2? Is there 3? Yep, you're right. I'm wrong. So inshallah we'll do this next week, and then I'm going to do the khawatir the week after that, and then, or what I'll do actually is, I'm going to go through the adhkar of the sabah and the masa the week after that, which everybody should be doing. And I'll get you a copy of that, and then and then we'll do the khawatir, and then that's the khalas. Jazakumullah khairan.
Takbir! Takbir!